Welcome to the final 2010 election analysis. Joining me in the studio today is Paul Baines from Cranfield and Fiona Baines from Mesh Planning. Now Fiona, let's have a look. What are your survey of floating voters telling you?
Well, what's been interesting coming out of the last week is that actually the picture has been changing quite rapidly as different events have been unfolding. The first thing that we saw was Bigotsgate, where unfortunately Gordon Brown made a gaffe in relation to a person in Rochdale. And what we saw there was that the news coverage really picked that up strongly. It meant that Labour's experiences shot up in terms of percentage, but of course, unfortunately, they were negative. The next thing that we've seen coming through, however, is a large increase in posters. And when we've had a look at this data, what we're seeing is it's not the big national campaigns. 75% of these posters are for local party candidates. And I think what we're going to see in the next week is things moving to a local level.
So Paul, how do you see this?
Well, I think part of the reason why it has gone local is because they've exhausted some of the other things that they've been using. There's party election broadcasts left over. The debates are all finished now. So voters have to start making up their minds. Now, there's an unprecedented number of voters, according to an Ipsos Mori survey in the marginals, that says something like 40% of people at the end of last week still had to make up their minds who to vote for. So the only way that the parties can now convert that 40% is at the local level by running up and down the country, which they're all doing. They've got heavy workloads at that kind of interpersonal level and through posters. And interestingly enough, part of the reason that posters work is not only do they persuade directly, but there's also a social effect. So if someone sees a poster put up, then that convinces them perhaps to put up their own, or just maybe to change their mind about who they're going to vote for. So there's a social kind of herd effect too, and that's particularly important in the last minute.
So Fiona, what are the survey members telling you about the posters? I mean, it occurs to me people just drive by them or walk by them.
Well, some of that is absolutely true, that they are just driving by or walking by. But we've seen comments in the diary where people have said, I've seen lots of Lib Dem posters, I've seen quite a lot of Conservatives, but I've seen no Labour posters. And that's telling them something. Or somebody else said, my next door neighbour, who I know is a staunch Conservative, has just put up a Lib Dem poster. Now, that's making me feel more confident about voting Lib Dems. So we are seeing some subtle persuasiveness coming through in terms of what's happening with these local posters.
Now, if we turn to the leaders' debates, we've seen 3 of these. The media's been full of them. There's been lots of talk about the power they've had. Has that been reflected in what you've seen in the survey?
Yes, I think the first leaders' debate was the one that really took everybody by storm, and that was where we saw Lib Dems really coming through very, very strongly in terms of the persuasiveness of the experiences that people were having. Since then, each one has become progressively slightly less compelling, but we're still seeing 32% of experiences being more persuasive and 32% being less persuasive in terms of voting power, which means that people are still watching the leaders' debate and still deciding what they want to do.
So Paul, leaders' debates, everybody has had lots of debate about this. People seem to be saying the Lib Dems seem to have kind of edged forward, and that seemed to have come out in the survey too.
Well, I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that the Lib Dems benefited from being part of the debate. It raised them to the same level as the two main parties, so they've benefited enormously from that. I'm not sure they won it in the end. They probably have won the marketing campaign overall. I would say certainly that amongst our survey floating voters that the Lib Dems come out better than the other two parties, particularly against Labour by a long way. But I would say overall the Lib Dems have probably won the marketing campaign so far, but the Tories have actually done reasonably well, but not perhaps quite as well as you would have expected given Cameron's opportunity, I would say. So there's a need to build on this opportunity much more than they have done. And I think in this last in this last week, in the last few days, I think we'll see frenetic activity in an attempt to translate sort of this fairly large pool of people who've still got to make up their minds.
And your feeling is that'll largely take place at a local level?
At the local level, posters, candidates and TV news. TV news at both local and national level becomes super important at this stage.
Well, it won't be long before we find out. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.